Most believe that the weight of their effort determines the height of their success, yet they remain blind to friction that governs every movement. It is a quiet, devastating illusion to think that more time, more sweat, or more intelligence will eventually bridge the gap between where one stands and where one wishes to be. True momentum does not come from the noise of activity, but from the stillness of a law that operates without permission or pause. When the external world refuses to yield, it is never a failure of strategy, but a precise reflection of a mental center of gravity that has been misplaced. There is a subtle, invisible coherence that organizes the chaos of daily experience into a predictable sequence of events. You have likely sensed a recurring static, a persistent feeling that despite every correct action, the final result arrived distorted or delayed. This is not a matter of luck or timing, but the automatic response of reality that cannot contradict your internal position. To struggle against circumstances is to fight a shadow while ignoring the object that casts it. It is a cycle that consumes energy while reinforcing the very walls that keep progress at bay. Overthinking is the ultimate form of inverted pursuit, an exhaustive attempt to solve through complexity what was originally broken through lack of internal alignment. Every anxious thought acts as a silent declaration of absence, a signal sent to mechanics of the world that what you seek is currently out of reach. This mental turbulence creates a repellent force, pushing objectives further into the distance the more one tries to grasp them with the hands of worry. One does not find solutions through the agitation of the mind, just as one cannot see the bottom of a lake through stirred mud. Wealth, influence, and ease are not destinations to be reached, but the inevitable symptoms of an internal state that has ceased to argue with itself. The gear that turns a mind is the same gear that turns a flow of capital and opportunity, yet most attempt to force the outer wheel while the inner one remains jammed by doubt. When there is a fracture in your internal coherence, the external world manifests that crack as a misconnection, a lost deal, or a constant sense of impending catastrophe. The cost of this misalignment is paid in the currency of mispotential, a tax levied by a law that remains indifferent to your intentions. You have not lost years of your life. You have simply inhabited a state that cannot, by its very nature, produce any other outcome than the one you currently see. The realization that your reality has been an honest, if painful, mirror of your internal disorder is the first step toward a pivot you have likely never considered. To turn back now is to accept the continuation of a loop that has already proven its futility. Only by understanding the silent mechanics of this mental law can the distorted reflections begin to straighten, shifting the world from a place of resistance to a landscape of effortless response. Observe the cycle of the tireless. There is a quiet, recurring tragedy in watching an individual consume every available resource, attend every seminar, and sacrifice sleep for the sake of professional or financial progress, only to remain bolted to the same psychological floor. This friction is not located in the competitive landscape, nor is it a result of a fluctuating economy or a lack of specific intelligence. It is the first, often ignored hint that the world does not reward the volume of physical action, but rather the quality of the internal source from which that action flows. When a machine runs at full capacity without moving an inch forward, the error is never in the gears, but in the anchor that has been left dropped in the depths of the unconscious mind. Many believe that if they simply increase the frequency of their attempts, the sheer weight of their persistence will eventually break the resistance of the external world. They treat life as a solid wall to be battered down through sheer force of will. However, the world is not a solid object. It is a fluid reflection of an internal stance. When an individual pushes with anxiety, the world pushes back with an equal and opposite tension, creating a stalemate that looks like hard work but feels like imprisonment. This is a law of mirrors, operating without a single mistake, yet interpreted by the unseeing as bad luck or insufficient grit. Consider profound exhaustion of the one who constantly pivots, trying every new strategy to escape a financial or professional plateau. Each new method is merely a new coat of paint on a structure that is fundamentally leaning. The foundation of this failure is the silent premise from which they operate, the unspoken, deep-seated belief that success is something to be captured, hunted, and restrained. In this hunt, the hunter inadvertently becomes a prey of their own desperation, signaling to mechanics of reality that they are currently in a state of lack. To seek something with fervor is to announce to the world that you do not have it, and the world, being a faithful responder, ensures that you continue not to have it. Effort, when born from the vibration of worry and overthinking, acts as a corrosive element rather than a constructive one. It dissolves the very opportunities it seeks to build because it is saturated with the fear of failure. There are those who seem to possess less intelligence and work fewer hours, yet they inhabit a different stream where doors open before they even knock. This discrepancy is not a mystery of fate or divine favoritism. It is a demonstration of internal alignment. The world is not a judge of merit based on how much one has suffered. It is a cold, precise mechanism that matches the frequency of the observer regardless of their perceived goodness or effort. Why is it that the most intense periods of striving often yield the most meager harvests? The answer lies in the invisible field that precedes every physical act. If the inner state is one of agitation, every step taken is a step deeper into that very agitation. You are not moving forward in space. You are merely vibrating intensely in a single spot, wondering why the landscape has not changed despite your immense exertion. The overthinker is like a pilot trying to fly a plane while keeping the brakes fully engaged. The noise is deafening. The fuel consumption is enormous, but the coordinates remains the same. To pursue is to declare that the object of pursuit is separate from the self. In the realm of the mind, distance is a psychological choice rather than a physical reality. When the mind is locked in a state of chronic overthinking, it is constantly calculating the distance between the current self and the desired goal. This calculation creates the very space it seeks to close. The more one obsesses over the how and the when of their success, the more they anchor the not yet into their immediate experience. By focusing on the path to be traveled, they inadvertently reinforce the fact that they have not yet arrived. There is a subtle violence in trying to force an outcome through mental strain. It is akin to trying to make a flower bloom by pulling at its petals with iron pliers. The external field of reality is governed by an order that is entirely indifferent to your human sense of urgency. In fact, urgency is a primary signal of a lack of confidence in the underlying process of the law. It is a confession that you do not believe the result is already yours, and thus the law of correspondence ensures that it remains an unfulfilled promise, always shimmering on the horizon but never reaching your hands. Observe the phenomenon of the closed door in a career or a business venture. Many spend their entire lives pounding on the same entrance, convinced that more force or a louder voice will eventually grant them passage. They fail to realize that the door is not locked from the outside by some malevolent force. It is held shut by the internal pressure of their own worry. When the mind is preoccupied with the possibility of failure, it creates a mental gravity that pulls the very failures it fears directly into its orbit, making the locked door a necessary part of its own internal narrative. This is a game played by the majority. The pursuit of a shadow. They chase the reflection of wealth and security, never realizing that the reflection only moves because they move. By focusing entirely on the external manifestation, the bank account, the title, the recognition, they lose sight of the center that dictates the movement of the entire scene. It is a closed loop of frustration where the more energy one pours into the chase, the faster the shadow retreats, staying exactly one step out of reach because it is tied to the seeker's own frantic movement. What if the struggle itself is the evidence of the error? If the natural state of the world is a fluid response to internal clarity, then any persistent obstacle is not a challenge to be overcome, but a sign of internal noise. This noise is the sound of a mind trying to do the work that only the deeper law can accomplish. It is an interference pattern that breaks the signal of prosperity, turning a clear, straight path into a labyrinth of self-imposed complexities and endless, fruitless deliberation that leads back to the point of origin. Overthinking is not a process of problem solving. It is a process of problem maintenance. Every minute spent analyzing why things are not working is a minute spent reinforcing the state of not working within the consciousness. The mind becomes a specialized instrument for detecting flaws, and by focusing on those flaws, it grants them a seat at the table of your reality. This is the gravity of the mind. It pulls toward itself whatever it holds in its most consistent, emotionalized focus. To worry is to pray for what you do not want, using the very power that was meant to create what you desire. Consider the financial state not as a sum of transactions, but as a byproduct of a specific mental density. Those who inhabit a state of abundance do not think about money with the same frantic energy as those who struggle. To the struggling mind, every cent is a point of tension, a potential loss, and a battle to be won. This tension creates a field of resistance that makes the acquisition of capital a grueling uphill climb. The money is not the cause of their peace. Their internal peace is the attractor of the money, while the overthinker's anxiety acts as a repellent that keeps prosperity at a distance. Most are operating under a system of inverted causality. They wait for the world to change so they can finally stop worrying, not realizing that the worry is the very thing preventing the world from changing. It is a stalemate with silent law. The law states that you must become the version of yourself that has a result before the result can appear, while the ego insists on seeing the evidence before it will change its state. Because the law is immutable and the ego is stubborn, the individual remains suspended in a state of perpetual waiting, watching others pass them by without understanding why. This state of waiting is a silent poison that breeds a subtle resentment toward those who seem to succeed with ease. It creates a narrative that the world is unfair, that the system is rigged, or that some are simply born lucky. Yet, the only choice being made is the one happening within the silence of the individual's own mind. The universe is a perfectly calibrated machine that responds with total precision to the dominant internal command. It does not matter if that command was conscious or accidental. The machine simply processes the input and delivers the corresponding output. How much of your current exhaustion is actually the result of the weight you carry internally? The heavy lifting in life is never done by the muscles or the intellect. It is done by the mental state that oversees the action. When you operate from a center of worry, every task feels 10 times heavier than it truly is. You are dragging the anchor of your own doubts across the seabed of your life, wondering why the ship is moving so slowly despite the engines running at full power and the sails being fully unfurled. There is an invisible field of coherence that exists beneath the surface of all human interactions and economic exchanges. When an individual aligns their internal state with a desired outcome, this field begins to organize events in a way that appears miraculous to the outside observer. Opportunities appear out of nowhere. The right people reach out at the perfect moment, and obstacles that once seemed insurmountable seem to melt away. This is not magic, nor is it a reward for being good. It is a natural function of a mind that has stopped fighting itself and has finally allowed the field to work. Most people are playing the wrong game entirely. They're playing a game of doing, while the masters of reality are playing a game of being. The game of doing is strictly limited by time, physical energy, and the scarcity of resources. The game of being is governed by the laws of mental resonance, which are not bound by any such constraints. To shift from one game to the other requires a radical abandonment of everything the world has taught you about how to achieve results, forcing you to look at the one place you have likely avoided, the quality of your own silence. Overthinking is the mind's desperate attempt to win the game of doing through sheer intellectual force. It believes that if it can anticipate every problem and plan for every contingency, it can guarantee a safe and prosperous passage. But the intellect is a limited tool that cannot see the infinite variables of the field. By trying to control the external world through thought, the mind creates more knots in the thread of life, leading to an existence of perpetual crisis management rather than one of creative expansion and effortless flow. Reflect on the times when things actually worked out for you with surprising ease. More often than not, the breakthrough came when you finally gave up, when you stopped worrying and surrendered the how. In that moment of surrender, you inadvertently dropped the resistance that was holding the result away. You accidentally stumbled into alignment because your mind was too tired to keep overthinking. The tragedy of the chronic overthinker is that they treat these moments of ease as anomalies rather than as a demonstration of the primary law of their existence. The resistance you feel in your life is not a message to try harder or to think more. It is a message to stop. It is a signal that you are pushing against the current of the law. If a key does not turn easily in a lock, forcing it will only break the mechanism and leave you stranded. The same is true for the mind and its relationship with reality. A life of constant struggle is not a badge of honor or a sign of dedication. It is a diagnostic report indicating a fundamental error in the internal configuration of the self. The world is a silent responder. It does not argue, it does not judge, and it does not have an opinion on what you think you deserve based on your effort. It simply echoes. If the echo you are receiving is one of lack, delay, and frustration, it is because the sound you are making internally is one of worry and frantic seeking. You cannot scream poverty into a canyon and expect to hear the word wealth bounce back to you. The physics of the mind are as predictable and as indifferent as the physics of sound or gravity. This realization brings a profound, if uncomfortable, clarity to one's history. It means that no one is coming to save you, because no one has actually been holding you back. The barriers that seem so solid in your professional and financial life are actually mental projections that have been solidified by constant, anxious attention. You have been an architect of your own prison, meticulously placing every brick of what if and not enough until the light of possibility was completely blocked out, all while blaming the guards who were never actually there. Why does the mind cling so tightly to overthinking when it is clearly so destructive? It is because the ego derives a false sense of control through worry. It feels that if it is worrying, it is at least doing something about the problem. To stop worrying feels like negligence, like leaving the gates of the city undefended against an invading army. But this is the ultimate deception of the overthinking mind. The worry is not a guard standing watch. It is a traitor that invites the enemy into the city by creating the very vibration that attracts a dreaded outcome. There is a silent order that governs the distribution of success and failure. It is an order that prioritizes internal coherence over external effort. When the internal state is a single, clear signal, the world has no choice but to organize itself around that signal with mathematical precision. This is why some people seem to have an unfair advantage in every venture they touch. They are not necessarily smarter or luckier. They simply possess a mental center that is not divided against itself. They do not leak energy through the holes of chronic anxiety. Consider the possibility that everything you have been chasing is actually trying to find you, but it cannot locate you because you are never in the same place twice. Your mind is always in a non-existent future, worrying about what might happen, or in a dead past, analyzing what went wrong. You have vacated the only space where the law of resonance can actually operate. The present moment of internal alignment. You are a moving target that the arrow of prosperity cannot hit. Not because the archer is poor, but because you refuse to stand still in your own power. We arrive at a threshold where the old narratives of hard work and meritocracy begin to crumble. It becomes clear that you haven't been failing because you weren't good enough. You haven't been stuck because you lacked the right degrees, the right connections, or the right timing. These are merely the stories the mind tells to make sense of a result it does not understand. The truth is much colder and more empowering. You were simply misaligned with the result you desired, operating from a state that made your goals mathematically impossible to reach. This misalignment is like trying to listen to a specific radio frequency while being tuned just 2 points away. You hear static, you hear fragments of the music, and you hear the noise of other stations, but you never get the clear signal. No amount of turning up the volume of your effort will fix the fact that you are on the wrong frequency. You have been turning up the volume of your exertion for years, wondering why the music of your life is still nothing but distorted noise and interference. Does it not feel more accurate to say that you've been fighting an invisible wind your entire life? You have taken the correct steps, said the right words, and followed the established paths, yet you have felt a constant, subtle pushback from reality. This pushback is a friction of a mind that is fundamentally at odds with its own goals. You want the wealth, but your internal state is one of wanting. And since the law gives you more what you are, it faithfully gives you more wanting and more seeking, but never the having. This is the final realization of the seeker, that the search itself is the primary obstacle. The more you seek, the more you confirm to your own consciousness that you do not have. The more you worry about not having, the more you anchor yourself into the state of the one who lacks. You've been trapped in a hall of mirrors, fighting reflections that you yourself are casting with every anxious thought. The fatigue you feel is not the fatigue of the journey. It is the fatigue of a soldier who has been fighting his own shadow in a dark room for decades. There is a profound discomfort in finally accepting that the external world has no power over you. It means you can no longer blame the economy, the boss, or your upbringing for your current position. But within that discomfort lies the only true freedom you will ever find. If the world is a response, then the source of the response is within your reach. The question is no longer, how do I change my life? But what is the state I am inhabiting that makes this life inevitable? The answer is not a technique to be learned. It is a recognition of where you have been standing all along. The air in the room changes when the mind stops arguing with the inevitable. You have spent years attempting to outrun a shadow, believing that if you only moved faster, you would finally reach the light. Yet the law of your own being has always been the ground beneath your feet, not the horizon in front of you. To realize this is to feel the sudden, immense weight of every unnecessary thought you have ever carried, dropping away like iron chains into a deep and silent sea. Control was always a fragile costume worn by fear, a desperate attempt to negotiate with a reality that does not recognize your anxiety as a valid currency. The unspoken rules of this existence have never been hidden. They were simply obscured by the loud, frantic vibration of a mind that felt it had to justify its own presence through constant worry. Now, the silence that remains is not an empty void, but a densely packed space of potential, where the need to know how finally yields to the quiet authority of knowing that. There is a profound elegance in the inversion of pursuit. When you stop chasing the reflection in the mirror, the reflection finally stands still, waiting for your next command. The center of gravity has shifted from the frantic periphery of circumstances back to the internal core of your own focus. This is the difference between the one who begs at the gate and the one who holds the key. The gate has always been open, but you were too busy describing the lock to notice that the hinges were already turning. Attempting to return to the old state of chronic agitation will now feel like a physical dissonance, a noise that no longer harmonizes with the truth you have recognized. The friction of overthinking, once mistaken for the heat of productivity, will now reveal itself as nothing more than the sound of mind grinding against the gears of a law it cannot break. You step through a door that only opens in one direction, and the comfort of your previous illusions has been permanently replaced by the sharp, cold clarity of your own internal responsibility. This recognition is not a conclusion, but the first breath of a different kind of life. To continue this alignment is to move beyond the static of the world and into the direct application of the law. Following the next steps of this unfolding is the natural movement of a mind that has finally decided to stop fighting its own power and instead choose a coherence of its ultimate potential. The mirror never moves first.